Don't worry, we are friends.
Welcome back to the FRENS VALIDATOR show. Today, we will talk about how we can make the Cosmos Hub successful, and obviously tokenomics is a crucial part of that. We will discuss how we can set the stage for the AEZ to become successful, but again, also how the Cosmos Hub finds its dominant role in the ecosystem. And I'm sitting here with Noam from Binary Builders. Binary Builders is actively working on Atoms tokenomics. So yeah, Noam, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. And before we get started, I think it would make a lot of sense if you could introduce yourself. So quickly talk about your journey in the Cosmos and beyond, and then maybe also what Binary Builders is doing, because you're not only tokenomic stuff, but also a lot of other different things. So
Yeah.
it would be cool to also briefly talk about that as well.
Yeah, sure. So I joined sort of the Cosmos ecosystem in 2021. Although I've been following the space since a while now. And I started at the Interchain Foundation as the developer relations engineer for the Cosmos Hub originally, and I focused a lot on the developer portal and the Interchain Developer Academy, which is this training program that we have for people that want to develop in Cosmos. And yeah, I ended up becoming the developer relations lead for a little bit. After a while, I moved to Binary. That was somewhere earlier this year, January actually. And at Binary, I work on something called the Builders Program, the Interchain Builders Program, and that is a sort of like a business development team that's trying to help Cosmos be more successful and Cosmos teams be more successful. So part of that work is this accelerated program that we do, where projects that are building in Cosmos, that are interested in migrating to Cosmos or integrating into Cosmos, we try to help them with technical support, but also business support, partnership support. Sometimes we even go so far as to help them with fundraising and go-to-market strategy and these kind of things. So it's nice. I get to see have a lot of exposure in seeing, all the different projects that are being built in Cosmos, and it's nice to see the business side of things compared to previously the more sort of like product/engineering side of things. And that's what I do. And at Binary, so we operate this builders program. We are also the primary maintainers of the Cosmos SDK. So we develop the Cosmos SDK that everyone's using to build blockchains. And we also run a validator, Binary Builders. Some places still called Binary Holdings. And we also have Numia, which is we run Numia, which is a data analytics company. It's popping up last year, basically. And yeah, more recently, we received a grant from the Atom Accelerator DAO to help out or to do some research on a few specific topics in the broad scope of this thing that people call token economics. I think there's a little bit more to it than just token economics, but that's where we're focusing our attention on a lot these days as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to unwrap here, and also I guess one thing that is really lacking a bit in the Cosmos is business development. So that's good that we have teams working on that.
Yeah.
And obviously also a lot of bright minds are involved at Binary Builders. For example, with Marco working on the Cosmos SDK, some like old and well-known Cosmos OGs are involved here. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about last year, because last year something interesting happened. Atom 2.0 was proposed and the community rejected it. The reasons are well known. It was an omnibus proposal. People found it very, very hard to swallow all of it. And this is why also the AA DAO that you just mentioned was formed, because they said, okay, we need to act quickly. We need to fund teams. We need to basically push this initiative because something needed to happen with Atoms tokenomics. So this is when the AA DAO was formed, and then 3 different teams started working on Atoms tokenomics, which is Binary Builders, which you are involved at, Blockworks Research, and RMIT. Before you talk a little bit about what those teams are doing specifically, can we just set the stage here? So what are we doing here? We talked about it briefly before the interview, but I think that's very important here. What are we doing here? Are we fixing atoms tokenomics? Are we optimizing them? So just to set the stage here for the upcoming conversation.
Yeah, sure. So one thing I always tell teams when we give them advice on their token economics stuff in the Builders program is that if you have broken token economics, a good product will fail. If you have good token economics, a bad product is not going to succeed. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
it requires both for your project to be successful, right? Currently, we have somewhat of a product, Interchain Security, with the Cosmos Hub, but we do not necessarily have very good token economics. And so it prevents us in some ways to do well with Interchain Security and potentially other products that we may or may not want to launch with the Cosmos Hub. And maybe even one of its products can be seen as the Atom token itself. You can consider that a product as well. And so for that, token economics are definitely important. But what do we mean by token economics? Because it's not as simple as just like inflation, right? Inflation is definitely part of this, and it's very important. And the inflation number is actually, quite high, and it's variable on the Cosmos Hub, which is difficult for numerous reasons. And so inflation is part of that story, but we're talking about the inflow or the generation of money, right? So the inflation or the revenue or any of that is money coming into the Cosmos Hub, which then is distributed to, well, the stakers and the community pool. So the inflow of money is one part of the story, but then when you're talking about token economics, you're also talking about the outflow of money. Where is the money going to? And this is something that we're thinking about quite a bit. And right now we're just spending it on delegation and staking and validators and community pool. And that's great, but in some cases we're spending way too much. Like in the bull market, in peak bull market, we can be spending several millions in a month on one validator, right? And that is actually quite a lot. And no offense to friends, I want you all to be happy to be, to do well financially, but there's just a smarter way to spend money. And similarly, right, in a bear market, we are now seeing a lot of validators who are complaining, which rightfully so, that they're not making enough money because we're simply just not printing enough basically for them. But we are actually printing enough money. We're just not distributing it very fairly. And so that's about the outflow of money. And there's other things we can spend money on too, to create an environment where, when it comes to this actual product, the thing that generates revenue that we really care about, of course, this is the end goal, the thing that generates revenue, that generates demand for Atom. We want to create an environment where people can and want to, because they're incentivized, to come into the AEZ, the Atom Economic Zone, and be in that environment, build in that environment, and be incentivized to do so. And token economics is definitely a part of that story.
Yeah, and I think the conversation is heading here to a very, very good direction, because some things that you mentioned also in regards to the current market situation, that some validators find it right now hard to pay USD related costs. We will talk about this in a minute. I think we're like in the right position here. So you are looking at how should we spend money, and then there are the other two entities, which is Blockworks Research and RMIT. So could you quickly cover what these guys are doing?
Yeah, sure. So Blockworks Research are well, when I was talking about the inflow of money, like the money coming in, Blockworks Research is talking more about the inflow. So they're working on the inflation model, but they're also working. So that's monetary policy and fiscal policy, and they're also working on some let's call them taxes, which is the idea of well, we have liquid staking, for example. We want liquid staking, but we don't want too much liquid staking because that's a risk to the network. Well, what do we do as society when we have something that we're saying, okay, this is okay, but we don't want too much of it? We put a tax on it, right? So it's like smoking, gambling, and all these other things. We put a tax on it, and we use that money, and it goes to something that's useful for society. And so they are saying, oh, well, we can do a tax on liquid staking where, in the beginning, up to 25% or 30% or whatever the number is, it's tax-free. But then after a while, as more people want to liquid stake, it gets more and more sort of like expensive to do so, and this should let the market sort of like decide what the optimal rate is. If we set the parameters right, it should be in a safe environment. So that's just an example. They're also working on something called the validator tax, which is designed to distribute that funds a bit more fairly across the different validators in the space, which is like quite an interesting model. And a few other things. And then one of the major points, of course, is the inflation model itself. And I think the idea so far, but it's up in the air, and the parameters are, up to the community, obviously, as always. But the idea so far is to, in the long term, reduce the inflation all the way down to like 3%, in several years from now. And I think the main important one here is also that, in the past, the inflation was, or so far at least, the inflation is bound to the bonding ratio, the amount of people that are staking tokens on the Cosmos Hub. And that isn't really necessary anymore, specifically with liquid staking. So we can just get rid of that variable inflation number. We can just have like one number that we can always count on. It's like, okay, today it is 10% and it will go down to 3%. In the next 6 years. And this is great for Atom economics because people who want to invest in Atom, or people who want to hold the token, they need to know what to expect when it comes to how much they're going to be diluted over time. So this is like a key part of this Atom as money conversation to make it more sort of predictable. And then there's RMIT, and that's a team from Australia, and they are working sort of like, if we take the two things that I was talking about, right, the inflow of money and the outflow of money and how we're spending things, there's something around this, which is sort of like, how do we decide upon these things, and how do we, how do we do governance, how do we do sub-DAOs, but also how do we create and maintain contracts with our interchain security, partners, the consumer chains. They're researching those topics, which is a bit more sort of like abstract about, governance, which is great because that's well needed. And they're sort of like researching that scope.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack here, especially what Blockworks research is doing in regards to the inflation schedule, because I think we can all agree on that it's not the most sustainable thing to inflate Atom annually by 14%. So they, for example, also proposed like a fixed inflation rate that is not depending on the onboarding period, because as you mentioned, with liquid staking, all of this discussion becomes a little bit more obsolete. But yeah, I want to touch base on like two things that you mentioned. The one thing is Atom being money, and also what you mentioned in the very beginning is that ICS is a good product, because there are some people who argue interchain security alone won't be enough to accrue value to Atom. It's a good product, but it's not enough, also because other competitors like Eigenlayer, Polkadot, and so are catching up. So my first question is, what makes Atom money today in your view? And then how do you view the whole discussion around interchain security is not enough for the Cosmos Hub and Atom to be successful?
Right. So the first thing that happened, I think that's interesting, and it's an important fact to not dismiss, is that the most of the world, when they think of the success of Cosmos, they think of Atom token, right? And this is incorrect, right? It's a bit silly to say, but it's an incorrect assumption to say, oh, if I buy Atom, I'm investing in the Cosmos ecosystem. You're not, right? You're not technically investing, but in some ways, actually, you are. Because if you look at the Atom token itself, it is in most dexes and places, it is sort of the preferred currency, right? Osmosis, it's got some of the deepest liquidity pools, and in other dexes, this is happening as well. And this is simply because, well, A, there's a lot of liquidity, but B, it's also in the minds of people, like this is the token for the ecosystem. And so the token is performing, much better than all these other tokens as well. There's in general much more liquidity also on the centralized exchanges, and so people are finding it much more comfortable to sort of like transact in Atom than they are transacting in sort of like more volatile tokens, like even Osmosis and all these other things. And of course, there are stable coins, right? And they play that role as well. So that is a bit of a tricky part. But we're seeing, especially in the AEZ, Atom tokens sort of become this like dominant thing. And that wouldn't have been possible, I think, for example, with things like Osmosis and things like other networks that sort of like pushed Atom into this sort of like prominent place. So the idea of like Atom as money is I think it's a contentious topic. Not everyone agrees with whether or not this is the right path forward, and I think that's a very sensible sort of thing. I think it's also not the only argument to be made for why to push for these specific token economics that we're pushing for. Atom as money is in my personal opinion, and I think the Blockworks team and stuff, they see that differently. But Atom as money is like, yes, this is a cool, a great outcome if it's possible. But if it's not possible, we can still make Atom work, in my personal opinion, right? Sunny did a recent, I think it was a podcast or something about this topic as well, about Atom as money, and I recommend everyone to sort of like listen to that. But as to your other point, what was it again? Maybe you can remind me, your second thing. You said Atom as money, and then
Yeah,
interchain security as
interchain security,
as a
yeah.
product. Yeah. This topic I feel a bit more comfortable sort of like discussing. Interchain security as a product. Yeah, I think it's easy to say that right now, like, oh, it's not working. We're not generating revenue, and fair enough. The only network that's generating some revenue and not much is Stride. Neutron isn't. I think it's unfair to assume that both networks like Stride and Neutron would be generating any sort of significant amount of money within the first year or two of their existence. Like, there's not really any blockchain that does that. Finding product market fit takes a long time. And especially when you're creating new markets like Stride, which are one of the first sort of like liquid staking protocols in Cosmos out there. So it's only logical to have to wait for that. Does that mean we've made maybe the wrong decisions in terms of what networks to add to the interchain security as consumer chains? I don't necessarily think so. I think having a CosmWasm environment in the AEZ is critical, like really critical. And I know that there are many interesting projects going to launch soon on Neutron. So bear with us, like, please hold. And for Stride, of course, I think that was also a really good move. I think they're the market leaders and will remain to be the market leaders in liquid staking. When we talk about the future for interchain security, like what kind of network should we really, add? We need to be very, 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 very smart about this. And there are sort of like two different types of networks that we can consider, right? There is a tokenless network, which I'm a fan of. I think a lot of blockchains can actually start without tokens, and find product market fit and launch a token when they actually need to, not in the beginning. But that depends on your product. Like if you need incentivization on like your DEX and stuff, that's hard to do. So that's one side of the story, and I think tokenless consumer chains that are building something that is basically maybe even owned by the Cosmos Hub, or it's something that is a Cosmos Hub product. I think it's a no-brainer. So this is where products can launch for the hub. Like the hub could own a consumer chain and could say like, hey, this is funded by Atom, this belongs to the Atom holders. And I think in that sense it's smart, because then we don't have to launch this on the hub itself, and we retain sort of like this somewhat minimal hub that is secure. And so that model makes sense to me. How do we get these people to build tokenless consumer chains? Well, that's the second question, right? And that's how then we're getting into the topic of incentivization and all these things. So we need to fix those things before, in my opinion, we can get interchain security to be successful. Then there are, of course, like token chains. So chains that have their own token, like Stride, like Neutron. And yeah, we have to ask ourselves the question, right? Like, does it make sense for some new chain with some new idea to launch within as interchain secured zone? And I think nowadays we'll find probably that people are much more skeptical for this, and because they are worried about the validator expenses and the lack of revenue. So I can very well imagine that it's going to take a little while for projects to actually, launch as a consumer chain, and they might want to initially bootstrap themselves as, their own chain, or in fact, rather maybe a smart contract. And I think this is an often overlooked model where, things could initially perhaps just be smart contracts on Neutron, and then they could potentially, become their own chain once they have product market fit. And I think chains and projects that generally like want to launch maybe a little too soon as a chain. That's my personal observation, at least. And whereas they could be, a smart contract. So then it leaves us, okay, well, what does that mean for interchain security, right? Because actually it was supposed to be this bootstrap thing where a network could come and say, hey, great, we're going to launch a product. We don't want to deal with validators. We don't want to deal with maybe some other things. We can launch as a consumer chain from day one. And that's becoming kind of like a difficult thing. So I think we'll find that we'll only get like the high quality, like high impact teams, that hopefully the Atom community is going to be a bit more selective. And that will launch some of these tokenless consumer chains that are actually like products for the hub. Let's give this a try. And of course, also, XCS just needs to become more, affordable. So like right now, running a node for every different consumer chain is very expensive, and the informal team is doing some really interesting work in designing atomic IBC, which would basically, make it slightly more affordable to run these consumer chains. That leaves us with this final question, which is the most important one. Well, then how does the, Atom token accrue value? How do we generate revenue? How do we do any of this? Well, first of all, there's two answers to that. So Atom is money is one of them, and the other one is interchain security, which right now isn't generating revenue, but likely will. The third one is, and this is something that's a bit silly, but like I think the Atom price is too much correlated to the macro environment anyway. Like if Bitcoin does well, Atom will do well in the long term, and this is just unfortunate reality for like every single token. What we really care about is sort of like its performance within that narrow field. For now, at least, right? In the long term, we care about more. And so the last thing that's sort of missing, the missing picture is this product, whatever the product is, the tokenless consumer chain, something that's running on the hub itself, some kind of infrastructure solution, perhaps. I'm a big fan of this specific sort of path where we build something that the hub is doing. I think the hub should have been Gravity Bridge. It should have been Axelar. It should have been maybe even Babylon Chain. It should have been Celestia. I think that there's a lot of mistakes that have been made and a lot of neglect that happened in the last 3-ish years that prevented the hub from going in that direction. And part of that is like talent loss, right? We've had a lot of like really brilliant minds that worked at the Interchain Foundation and at Tendermint, and they all started their own companies and they started focusing on other things. One of the hardest things here, it's not just about incentivization. A part of this is about incentivization, and it's about making sure that people who build on Cosmos get rewarded. Like the path of least resistance is still to launch your own token, to do it somewhere else, because guess what? You're going to make a shit ton more money launching your own token with your new product than if you're going to build this on the hub, right? Because the hub only has a certain amount of money. Sorry, I'm ranting a little bit, but I'll finish my story. And so a lot of talent actually went and left. And so we're thinking at Binary, we're thinking about, well, how do we, create an environment that, talent wants to stick around in the AEZ? And we do this through something that we call the Developer Revenue Incentivization Program. This is this model that we're designing, this module, and a few other things as well. But it's sort of like, maybe the best way to summarize it, it's like the work that we're doing with the 3 teams, like we're not designing a product that is going to launch on the hub that will generate revenue. We can't do that. That is very hard to do. These are things that take years. What we can do is set the stage for other people to want to do this and to be able to do this effectively and successfully. And that's what we're working on.
Yes, and we will also talk about this program shortly. But just to unpack like 1 or 2 things that you've mentioned. So first of all, I really love the idea of tokenless consumer chains because I think it makes the most sense. And also the critical aspect of having Neutron in the AEZ, because a lot of projects completely rush the decision of launching their own chain because tokenomics are, as you know it best, a pretty complex topic. So yeah, people like try to rush too fast to launching a chain from a technical perspective, even though it does not make really sense from an economical perspective. So I think it's like very important to start on maybe like Neutron, mess around, break things, try out things, because when you're a chain, it's like mistakes are leading to like more severe consequences, so to say. So I think what you mentioned is completely right here, is that we need Neutron as like an environment to play around and then potentially launch an O-chain in the future. And I think this is also what we will talk about shortly, is that we have tokenless consumer chains in that regard, because I think in retrospect, it does not make sense to buy out chains, what we have seen with Stride right now, because there's an existing token and it's like way too complex to make like a deal that makes sense for both sides. So all of the chains you have mentioned, Celestia, Axelar, Stride, it's like very difficult to buy them out because just to find like common ground here, even like for smaller chains like Stargaze, I think it will be super difficult to find something. So if those chains would like being bought from the very beginning without a token, just that you sell shares in the beginning and then just buy out a few shareholders, I think that would make things much less complicated.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think in general, though, like regardless of whether or not you're launching a consumer chain, even if you're just launching a blockchain, I think you can launch without a token. I think very often you should, unless you need it for incentivization reasons. But yeah, the only hard part is like, well, I guess as a team you can still invest without having a token initially. So you can still fundraise. That's what I mean. Sorry. I think one of the main issues is here is like, well, how are we going to make sure that these teams that built their own sort of like tokenless consumer chains that may or may not launch a token in the future, how do we get them the money to effectively build for like 2 or 3 years until they launch? And this is going to be hard to justify and hard to get approval from the Atom community. It's like, oh, let's invest in this project. Like the Atom it's not a hedge fund. Like we're not trying to invest in, we're not a VC. And so, but I think there's still a path for these teams to just fundraise through normal traditional investment, proceedings, where it's like, okay, cool, 15% of our tokens go to the investors, and we just raise like 1.3 million or something, or 10 or whatever it is, and have them build, and then but they're building on consumer chain. And beforehand, we make an agreement with the tokenless consumer chain. We say, like, oh, if at some point you launch a token, we want X percentage of that, and that's the payment for being able to be bootstrapped on as a consumer chain. And of course, like, yes, for now we want 25% of revenue or whatever the percentage is. But if you ever do launch a token, then this is the agreement, and otherwise we have to kick you out of the network, etc. The question is, like, can we really enforce that? Like at that stage, when they've got product market fit and they're ready to launch a token, like, and maybe they don't want to give 30% to the hub or something, and maybe they do, maybe they don't, and then maybe they'll just bugger off somewhere else. So they could technically, right? And this is one thing that I sort of find very difficult with interchain security, is that if a project becomes extremely successful at some point, what's to stop them from moving and launching their own sort of like chain with their own validator set, right? This is, and the only way to prevent that, and this is what Neutron is doing and is interested in, and that's what I like about it, is sort of like creating a very tight incentivization or like alignment between the two chains, right? So like Neutron recently gave us like a whole bunch, or is planning to give us a whole bunch of tokens that weren't given in the airdrop, that would effectively give the Cosmos Hub 5% of the total supply of Neutron, which is currently actually 50% of the voting power. So that's really powerful. And so like consumer chains can actually create like these partnerships that sort of like, make sure that they don't want to leave from each other, like, make sure there's incentive alignment. Tokenless consumer chains, it's a bit hard to do it in that case. And that's the tricky part, right? And that's something that I think is still an unsolved problem.
Yet I would also argue that if most of your customers like basically are on Neutron, so if you find product market fit and the user base, most of the Neutron users are usually also people who use the Cosmos quite frequently. And I think if I find product market fit, which is like very hard to do in crypto, and I know where my customers are, then I wouldn't go ahead and say, F you, Cosmos Hub. I
Right.
completely screw our agreement and lose all of my users just because I have, the idea of being like more greedy or like collecting more money. And still, I think then again, the aspect of tokenomics are not easy would also like, again, come into play. And the hub buying me out is like also very attractive for me as a founder, I would argue.
Oh, so okay, yeah. So the hub being the full owner of that consumer chain before the
Yeah,
token
so the
was
idea is
launched.
to basically launch as Stride. I collect money with very traditional company shares, and then we just go ahead and say, okay, we do like a similar deal to what Stride wanted to do, but without a token, just like the founding team, a few founders that can easily make a nice exit, but everything goes to the hub. No token holders, no inflation schedule, clean.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, okay, exactly, because that would cut the price down by at least. Well, there was no token, so that would be the original.
Yeah, no discussion
Yeah,
around should we pay the fully diluted market cap or the
yeah,
current market cap.
exactly. Yeah,
We
I'm
buy a
curious. I
startup,
mean,
so to
it's an
say.
interesting. It's just a very interesting concept of this idea of like this decentralized entity, like the hub, purchasing other companies. So I think this is quite. There's a lot of stuff that people haven't thought about this problem as well. So like one thing, for example, is like the trademark owner of Stride, right? Like the Stride name. There's a trademark behind it. So do you know who owns the Cosmos Hub trademark and the name and Cosmos trademark within Cosmos?
Maybe the ICF?
Yeah, exactly. The Interchain Foundation. And then some company has to own it, right? Like you can't give it to a blockchain. It's not a legal entity. It's not recognized. So if we would have purchased Stride, like who would have become the owner? Like I'm pretty sure the Interchain Foundation is not interested in becoming the trademark owner of Stride, right? So some foundation would have to like fundamentally change their setup to be. It's like Stride. I don't know if there's a Stride Foundation. I'm guessing there is. Um,
I think
they
it's
would have
Stride
like
Labs, right?
Stride Labs.
Stride
Well,
Labs.
generally you would have a foundation, and then you would have a developer company that is sort of like detached, and they receive money from the foundation. So you have like in the case of Interchain, we have the Interchain Foundation, and then there's Interchain GmbH, which is a German company, not a Swiss company like the foundation, and they're sort of like related, but they're it's not the same company. Besides that, though, so some company would have to like some foundation, Stride Foundation, would have to sort of like be adjusted so that they are, bound by the rules of the Cosmos Hub somehow, and that is actually legally tricky, and it depends on where they're based, whether or not this is even possible. So there's all these like side things that people just haven't even thought about. They're just like, oh yeah, it's cool, we can acquire Stride, but like the practicality of all of this, like, I really wish they didn't just sort of like push for that proposal just like boom on Cosmoverse without really thinking through some of these issues. I think it wasn't in the end great for the public image. I do think it was great for starting that conversation. I think it's one of the biggest, most interesting experiments to have sort of like unfolded. It's sad to see it sort of end so quickly. I was curious to see more thought being put into it. But yeah, so yeah, tokenless consumers is interesting for me, not just because we can acquire them, but also because I think again, this is about incentive alignment, right? Like the path of least resistance, again, as a consumer chain, is to launch something with a token, because then I have, probably millions and millions and millions of dollars in my pocket when I do successfully launch my product, which is nice. And it's important to recognize this, that founders care about, two things. They care about their baby, right? Their baby being their product. They want it to be successful, and they care about being rewarded for that, right? This is the second thing. And in tokenless consumer chain, it's great, so everyone can have their little baby, but like they can't necessarily get the rewards from it. And and that is very important. And then yes, a buyout is one path, but I don't think the hub will want to buy out every single consumer chain, a tokenless consumer chain. So what I think is interesting about tokenless consumer chains is that, for example, let's take a hypothetical example. Let's say Hub wants to do data availability sampling, like similar to the Celestia. Let's say the Hub wants to compete with Celestia. I hope they don't, because it's a little too late for that. But let's say it wants to do that. It would be a bit silly to launch this on the Hub itself, right? Because that would be, getting in the way of our security platform, Interchain security, and all these other things. So what do we do then? Was, we launch it as a tokenless consumer chain. But who's building this? Well, maybe some team that's being paid for by the Cosmos Hub to do this. Maybe it is already in formal systems, right? Maybe it is already one of the teams that are closely associated with that. Maybe they don't necessarily care about the millions of upside that is possible. They just really care about the hub, and they like to work in this environment. They want the safety of knowing that they're going to get paid, you have a salary for the next year. But they don't necessarily need millions and millions and millions of upside. There is a target group that is talented people who don't necessarily want to take the risk, entrepreneurial risk. And these people can technically build tokenless consumer chains, products for the hub, owned by the hub, paid for by the hub, that would just launch as a chain that is just owned by the hub fully, without any buyout, without anything else. And I think this is again a very viable path for the hub to launch products on.
Yeah, and especially I think in those current market conditions where it's also like hard to find investors, VCs, and all of this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you just have the right connection to the hub and a good idea, I think this would make a lot of sense. But all of this also goes hand in hand what you guys are doing. So you mentioned a lot, how can we incentivize people to build within the AEZ? And I think Bendy said something like from the ADAO, said something very important during your panel. All of this is about setting the stage and doing the groundwork to incentivize people to build. And you guys are also like building like 3 interesting modules that should contribute to this. One is the Atom Alignment Treasury, then the Developer Revenue Incentivization Program, and a Stability Reserve. We touched slightly on all of those 3 modules, but if you could just dive into this, what is the Atom Alignment Treasury for, the Developer Revenue Incentivization Program, and finally, the Stability Reserve Fund?
Yeah, sure. So the Atom Alignment Treasury is really something to solve 2 problems, or to address 2 things. The first example being liquidity as a service. So Stride recently, made a proposal asking for the hub, like, hey, can we get 450,000 Atom to, and we'll liquid stake half of them, and then we'll put them on Astroport in the liquidity pool so that there's more liquidity in the network. This is great because what that means is that the hub is still, they still own that money. They didn't lose anything. They still have the LP tokens, and they can get those tokens back whenever they want to. But at the same time, both Astroport is, benefiting from this, a Neutron product, or like a product that's also launched on Neutron. And they benefit from this, but also Stride, because now there's more liquidity between liquid staked Atom and Atom, right? So this is great, and it doesn't cost anyone anything. Yes, it's money we don't have access to right now, but it helps everyone. So this is this concept of liquidity as a service, but that process is really, really difficult to do. It's like manual, like you need a multi-signature wallet that holds the money, they manually liquid stake it, etc. And there's no real clear way for the hub to sort of like maintain and manage its position. So that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is what I also mentioned earlier, the Neutron airdrop that's going to the community pool. It's kind of nice that they're doing this, and it's really, again, about sort of incentive alignment and making sure that the Cosmos Hub can vote on very important things that happen within the AEZ on Neutron. But even if these tokens go to the community pool, it's going to be extremely hard for us to vote on these things, to put these tokens into, again, maybe liquidity as a service if we're interested in all these things. So what the Atom Alignment Treasury really is a vehicle for us to do these kinds of things, right? Liquidity as a service and alignment. And at its very first stage, what that would be, it's very simple actually. It would just be another address that sits inside the community pool. So the community pool will now have 2 addresses basically instead of 1. And one of them is the community pool that we know, and the other one is the Atom Alignment Treasury. And the Neutron tokens would go in there. The LP tokens that we have for Stride would go in there. And it would make it, well, we have to make some changes right now. It's a bit complicated. Don't want to get too technical, but basically there's a bit of a hack that's currently going on in most Cosmos chains where the governance account doesn't truly own the community pool. It can only sort of like spend money, but it can't do all these other sweet things like transfer it over IBC and all these other things. So that's something we need to fix, and we're designing how to fix it right now. And then and so the Atom Alignment Treasury is one of these sort of like vehicles to do these things with, and then it will interact with other players in the AEZ that will sort of like automate that workflow. So, for example, the outcome here would be that we could say, hey, I want to take, I don't know, 200,000 Atom and put them in this lending protocol, and then, or half of it, and then do with both of those things in another LP, right? Something like this. And that would just be one governance vote, and then in the background, everything would magically happen without any multi-signature wallets, while we continuously, retain control over those tokens. That's the Atom Alignment Treasury. Should I hop straight on to the next one, or
Yeah,
you have any
exactly.
questions? All right, cool.
Oh wait, one thing I think like what in terms of what I found interesting is you mentioned liquidity as a service. Is this like also one part of the discussion of the hub being an interchain provider? Because with interchain security, we have security as a service. So then liquidity as a service is also like part of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this makes interchain security more interesting. Like the hub used to be sort of like this it had this idea of credible neutrality, right? So it's like, oh, we're not in favor of any specific Cosmos chain. But now that we have interchain security, of course, we are in favor. And in fact, in the past, I think we've always been in favor. If we weren't supportive of osmosis, then the Atom token would have probably done a lot worse in the Cosmos space in general, right? So we have incentive alignments already. We are not neutral. We've never been neutral. And so if we're not neutral, we need to make sure that we work hard and allocate our funds in a way that benefits the things that benefit us, which is consumer chains, etc. But I would also say not just consumer chains, anything that is the AEZ, and in my opinion, osmosis is also part of the AEZ. And so liquidity as a service is a way to do that, and it would make the interchain security product more attractive, right? It's like, hey, come to us. You can launch a chain. We will also provide liquidity. We are sort of, in some sense, some kind of a market maker. We'll provide liquidity. We can provide resources to build. It's this whole package where it's like suddenly interchain security becomes a lot more attractive for people. And that's sort of like part of the story.
Plus, also, I think if I understand the flywheel here correctly, because I mean, for Neutron, there's like one chicken and egg problem in the beginning, which is like liquidity. So
Yeah.
without liquidity, there are no fees being generated from DeFi. So if the hub goes ahead and puts liquidity into DeFi, fees are being generated. And because Neutron is leveraging interchain security, those generated fees are also going back to the Cosmos hub. So the hub causes DeFi activity, which causes fee generation, which causes value accrual or value revenue to Atom stakers. Could you argue
Some
this?
extent. Yeah, to some extent. I don't think that's the focus, because think about it this way: a market maker can't just, putting all the money that we have into some LP and then getting, well, the rewards from the LP, but also the fees that are being generated on the network. I think those amount to not so much. I wouldn't necessarily count on a lot of revenue being generated through that process. This is not the thing that matters right now for us. What matters right now is to use it as a bootstrapping method to make sure that Neutron and products on Neutron can be successful. If you look at Astroport right now, I think the fees that are being generated by the LP position that we have with Stride and Liquid Atom and Liquid Stake Atom and Atom, the fees that are generated there are not so much. And if we really want to care about sort of fees, we should probably start LPing on
But it
osmosis, right?
kickstarts it.
It
Like,
kickstarts it,
kickstarts
exactly.
it,
Yeah, exactly. That's the idea. And then the long term, once it's kickstarted and the economical environment on Neutron is like really attractive to participate in, there's like a frictionless economy because there's a lot of liquidity there, and that should draw users. Well, I don't think actually that draws users. I think it's a requirement for users before they can even get drawn there. What really draws users is a killer app. Right, this is the most important thing, because like you can look at Astroport, for example. It's like the user interface is clearly not as well established as Osmosis. Like Osmosis has been around for much longer. They've built all this stuff out. Osmosis is still a more attractive place to trade, right? It makes sense. What we're just setting up with the LP position we have on the hub now is just to make sure that, well, if they ever get to that stage where they, the UI improves and then things change, at least it's also going to be attractive on the liquidity side of things, right? So it's both requirements that we need to meet. We can meet one requirement. The team itself needs to meet the killer app requirement, basically.
Yeah.
And so it's collaboration. And then the second thing, it's a long phrase, the developer revenue incentivization program. Honestly, let's just call it the DRIP. That's what it's short for. And so the DRIP is quite a simple thing. It's a modification to something that we call the distribution module, which is sort of like how money is distributed, right? So inflation or revenue comes in, and then there's this piece of software on the hub that distributes money to the stakers and the community pool. Now, there are things that we spend money on that have sort of like fixed dollar costs, and then there are things we spend money on that are not necessarily fixed dollar costs. So the 10% that we spent in the community pool, it's okay if that's 10%. It doesn't really matter if that's less today and more tomorrow. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it would be nice if it's more, but like it doesn't matter if it's fixed by USD cost. But there are other expenses that we have where the US dollar cost is actually very important. So the validators being one of them. Running a node can cost anywhere between like 100 to 800 a month. Running a validator, I think. And so those are, bills that need to be paid, right? And the same thing is we have developers, right? Specifically the informal systems team and HiFi that are, recently made a proposal in the forum to get funded. Think about it this way: they're asked for about, I think, 5 point something million, and they want to be paid in Atom. That's the only way they can get paid right now, right? So the problem with that is that at the end of the year, next year, right, that certain amount of Atom that was 5 million in the beginning of the year could just as well be 50 million worth, or it could be worth 1 million. If it's worth 1 million, Informal and Haifa, they're screwed because they can't pay their bills. And if it's 50 million, we just spent 50 million on, and it's ridiculous. We spent so much money on something that we shouldn't have been spending on, right? And so that's how the normal way of community spool spends work. And this is kind of broken. And so our way of thinking is like, well, what if we change that and we make sure that when somebody requests money, when there is a US dollar cost sort of like attached to it, why don't we just say, let's say, again, we're informal systems, we can say, oh, let's make a request, and we say, hey, we want between like 4 and 6 million. And then every day, this drip module will check and say, okay, today, 5 million is 0. What is it? 0.30% of what's being generated in inflation. Cool, let's give it to them. And then tomorrow it might be more because the Atom price goes up or down or whatever. And then it will change how much Atom we pay out based on the US dollar value. Of course, there's a maximum limit to that. So, it won't go over a certain amount. So to summarize, maybe in a simple way of saying it, the drip is really a way to incentivize, to do payments for developers, and to make sure that they can get paid and that they can get paid on a daily basis, right? That we don't overspend and that they don't get too little. And more importantly, that the hub is at any point in time is able to sort of like withdraw and say, hey, you guys aren't doing good work. Let's stop the funding. This is not possible right now because like we pay a whole year
In
it goes
advance.
to a multi-signature. Yeah, exactly. And then sort of like questionable whether or not that money was going to go back. Accountability processes are kind of difficult as well. So that's the drip. It's a very simple thing, actually. It's not so complicated. It's just a fix a simple problem. I think what's more interesting is the stability reserve fund, and this is something we'll do a post about soon. What that is just, again, it's about these US dollar cost sort of expenses. Like, we need to start thinking as the hub as like a company. And what does a company do? If it makes a lot of money in it's a bit loud in here. We need to start thinking of the Cosmos Hub as a company. And what does a company do if it makes a lot of money? It puts money aside, right? It doesn't just go and spend 10x on the salaries and 10x on the rent and 10x on everything. It puts money aside and it tries to pay for everything in the same way. And when the market is really bad or they're not performing really well, they take their savings or etc. Then they spend the savings that they have. And the stability reserve fund is just a savings account. And so basically what we're saying is like, oh, in the bull market, we check what the price is based on the previous price in the last X amount of days. And it's like, if it's significantly higher, we'll take today's earnings and we'll put them in a little bucket, some of them, right? Like 10%, 20%, whatever it is. We put them in a little bucket and we keep that for later. We might convert some of that to US dollar, actually. Maybe not, maybe we do, maybe we don't. And then when it's a bear market, we use that money for things that have, again, dollar costs. So validators and developers. And so the money that we had back then, those atoms, or ideally they were dollars to begin with, we use them when we go move them to the drip, but we also use them to pay validators and only validators, not delegators, but just validators. This is, again, a mechanism to make sure that in bear markets, a couple of years from now, once this fund is sort of like built out, that validators can be safe to know that, okay, well, we have this money, we will be making more than we did in the past. We will be making sure that we can pay for our nodes. And so again, like that as a summary, those three modules that we're designing, they're sitting at sort of like how the hub spends its money. Blockworks research is thinking about how the hub, how money comes in and how we handle what happens with the money that comes in and how we handle inflation and all these things in fiscal policy. And then RMIT is just about like, well, how do we sort of like,
governance. Yeah, so I think like to conclude here also is like, so ultimately, all of this is like necessary to set the stage to incentivize people to stay in the AEZ and to build in the AEZ.
Exactly.
Whereas Blockworks research is doing all of the complicated tokenomics things, making sure that we are not overpaying for security, because right now the inflation is like just too high. And even though the inflation is so high, still a lot of validators find it hard to pay for server costs, which is ridiculous considering that there's a 14% inflation. But you are like coming in and saying, okay, we are setting the stage here with the 3 different modules. So first of all, to incentivize developers to build in the AZ, because there will be a reliable income in USD value, not in Atom value. Then basically to position the hub as kind of a company that puts money aside when there's more money on the sideline, and like spending that money which is on the sideline in rough market conditions, as we have it like kind of right now, or as we had them in the past. And then also like with the alignment fund, is like to make sure that we bring Atom to those areas where we want Atom to be. So we want to make sure that Neutron is developing a flourishing DeFi ecosystem, because ultimately, if this succeeds, we will also experience some fee revenue coming to Atom further down the road. So we want to have like a working DeFi ecosystem. But the chicken and egg problem with every DeFi ecosystem, the crypto ecosystem, is attracting liquidity when there is no liquidity. So Atom could be like this kickstarting institution, so to say, to make sure, okay, now we are bringing this ecosystem to life. So is this like kind of the right conclusion of those 3 modules and setting the stage?
Yeah, I think you summarized it well and more succinct than I ever could. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. But I think, yeah, this was like very, very important here. And like speaking of like the wrap up, I think as we are like also getting closer to the hour, so I think we have like talked about some very, very insightful stuff. First of all, is like to what we just mentioned, making the AZ an attractive environment for people to build, but also like in terms of the hub potentially acquiring tokenless consumer chains. I think all of this is like pretty interesting. And a lot of things have been discussed at Cosmos 23, but there is no one big omnibus proposal coming to the
Right.
hub. So my question is now, where are we going from here? There are a lot of nice ideas on the table. What is happening
Yeah.
now?
I think most likely we're doing separate proposals for each and individual little piece that we're designing, right? And we're thinking about. So um, I think the first proposal, and it will probably happen soon, will be the Atom Alignment Treasury, simply because we know that this is what people want already. We have already done, the LP position with Stride. We are already receiving money from the Neutron airdrop. Like, this is just a simple infrastructural thing that we can solve. We are designing that right now in a more specific way. So that will probably be the first proposal that will go online, and on chain on the forum and stuff. And then after that, you know, proposals will just keep going. We want to make sure not to overwhelm everybody, right? So we're probably going to, once our research is completed, we'll put everything in, most likely just like one page where you can see everything and have a summary of what it all means, and then click on it, and then you'll find the long form article that goes into the specific topic. And then, once that's completed, proposals will slowly start to emerge on the forum over the next couple of months, if not half a year or something. So that can take a while, because I know it's a lot to swallow and it's a lot to take in. Uh, and so we want to make sure that we give everyone enough time to ask questions and to engage, and also for content creators like yourself to spend time on this and to investigate and to, like, do what you guys are great at, which is explaining things to the general audience also. So I appreciate also the opportunity for being here, and for you guys doing this work. That's really great.
Yeah, again, the pleasure is mine. And I think, like, finally, what you just mentioned is very important. So, what is a good way to stay on top of that, follow the progress, ask questions? What are some websites or Twitter handles to follow to stay on top?
Yeah. Well, the forum is probably the place where the long form articles and the proposals themselves go. So that's forum.cosmos.network. It's a good one. There's also a lot of other things happening, which is very interesting. And if you're interested in that, I would suggest you sign up and join the conversation. On Twitter, you can follow me. My name on Twitter is Noam with Fido, and then you can follow David, or as he's known as Effort Capital. He's sort of like leading the Blockworks team. I'm not sure how active the RMIT group is on Twitter. I would suggest you read their long form articles on the forum. I can have a whole list of who to follow on Twitter. That's probably all, but maybe this is a good starting point. And if you have any questions also about any of this, my DMs are always open, so you can just send me a DM, or you can message on the forum and we can chat about it.
And as always, you can find all of the mentioned links in the show notes. With that being said, Noam, thank you so much for unwrapping all of those things with
you.
me. It has been a very, very insightful discussion, I must say. So yeah, once again, thank you so much, and I hope I see you soon on the show.
Thank you. All right then. Have a nice day.